All right. Hello, everyone. Alec here, host of the Learners Podcast. So excited to bring you another exciting preview of the programming that we got coming your way for Research Week. If you don't know, Research Week is the biggest research event ever. It's happening the first week of June. We've got lots of programming, different niches for different folks. Pick the stuff that you want to kind of tune into. All the in-person tickets are kind of gone, but you can still tune in remotely. We have unlimited ones of those. And today I'm very excited to be chit-chatting with none other than Zach Schendel, who is one of our speakers at UXRConf this year. Zach is Senior Director at DoorDash. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
amazing. Zach, how are you feeling today? Good vibes?
Yeah, good vibes.
Amazing. So I think where I'd love to start is your talk is fundamentally about relationships, right? The different types of stakeholder relationships and how to navigate them. You've been managing researchers for quite a while, I would think. This is not your first rodeo doing research stuff. Can you tell me why you think this is such an important thing? And I feel like this is a common theme that it never ends, the importance of talking about this and the evolution of how we interact with people. Why is this like such a big thing that we want to really hone in on?
I mean, researchers don't operate in a vacuum. And in many ways, researchers don't have 100% control over what happens with the insights that they come up with. And so the ability to build relationships with the folks that can fill in the gaps or that do the other pieces of the product innovation process really elevates the impact or the ability of a researcher to actually matter within a company. And you're dealing with real people on the other end of those relationships, all of whom have different opinions or different past experiences with working with research teams. And so if you can't navigate the different personalities or the different attitudes or expectations that other people have of research functions from day one, then your ability to matter, ultimately to, see promotions or get hired in places is going to be severely impacted.
I love what you said there, like your ability to matter is compromised if you can't figure this skill set out. I guess that cuts pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately, if you're just presenting to an empty room or no one's coming to your back rooms to, see the qual, or nobody's reading your presentations, you're sort of screaming into the void. So you have to have those relationships in order to be a part of the process.
When you hear people talk about like, people aren't taking me seriously or they're not reading my report, is that where your mind first goes?
Yeah.
Is like, what's the nature of your relationship with these people?
Yeah, I do. I have heard that in the past, but there's so many ways, and that's kind of the point of the talk. We're going to define different sort of types of personalities or things that you're going to run into as a researcher from cross-functional partners, and then how to navigate each of them. So different tips that we've seen be successful through the years with how to get any kind of PM on board with insights or research as a function, or to see us as an equal partner.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a minute since I've been a full-time researcher, like in that role, and I will be completely candid, like I sucked at this. Like I would say that I had one personality type that I really vibed with, that it worked really well, where,
what was that?
I don't know how I would describe this. I don't know if this at all matches the way you think about this, but people who were like, everything else be damned, like let's figure out how to make this user or customer happy, and like just really deep focus there. Now, obviously, if you're a research leader, that's not good because you need to also have the context of the rest of the business and whatnot. But as an IC researcher, there are situations I think when that can be effective. And when I got to work with people who are just like super focused on just like deep, like understanding the user, understanding how do we make them happy, being able to say that the product is like currently not very good or like a piece of crap or at best a toy, that was awesome. That was like, I'm a pig in shit in that moment. Anybody else, it was a disaster for me, and it was a skill set I never developed until I stopped being a researcher. And
I
I would
love
say that it definitely affected my ability for upwards mobility in the organizations I worked in.
it. I laugh about super positive feedback from, let's say, some cross-functional partner like a product manager. I've seen some of the best research anyone has ever done happen on various teams that gets crickets and completely ignored. But I've also seen research that's kind of like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that actually innovative or interesting or useful, but it happened to agree with the
Ah,
opinion that the product manager had coming into the research, and it supported what they thought the path we should take should be. And then all of a sudden, it's the greatest research that they've ever seen. It's quite interesting.
funny how that happens, eh?
Yeah,
Um, all the surveys that say that I'm tall, strong, handsome are the ones that I find most the most valid. The
yeah.
other ones have
Incredible.
various methodological errors, of course.
What an insight. Yeah.
Where do you like? There is a really grand irony that this is such and I think I have a relatively decent, overview of the strengths and weaknesses of the field, at least compared to most folks. This is like a chronic problem area. There is a grand irony to this, that for a group of people that are so focused on understanding, other humans at like not just a functional level, but like this emotional level and this aspirational level, that we can't figure this out when it comes to our colleagues so well.
Yeah. I don't know. There are actually people who are really good at it. I don't even think I'm that good at it, really, when it comes down to it. I learn a lot from a lot of the people that I work with on my teams. And I also try to hire people that I think are good at it, because I think you can kind of tell when someone is going to be able to create good relationships with cross-functional partners. And there are just skills that researchers have that I think when they form relationships with people that are in qualitative research settings, for
Yeah.
example, somebody's random living room in some other country, or out and about on a train with someone, where you can see that they're able to just get them to open up and get really close with them, and have that person not put on a show or put up walls when they're talking with the researcher, that that those will translate really well to doing the exact same thing with cross-functional partners within businesses. But that's not the only thing that works. Yeah, I think there's ways that anyone can do it. Anyone can do it with any product manager that they work with. You just have to find the right in. You have to figure out what that product manager is. What's the language? I guess, like, what's the love language of that product manager, and how are you going to speak to that in order to like stoke that fire?
Yeah. So you have, how many researchers work for you at DoorDash right now, approximately?
The team is about 20 right now.
20. Okay. Have you noticed any things that you've seen which is like a really strong, seemingly disconnected or random signal that they're like really killing it with their relationships, that really comes to mind that you see over and over again?
Yeah, but keep in mind that this might not actually be useful outside of DoorDash. It is probably useful in companies that are more of like, I'd say, like, I would describe DoorDash as more of like a hybrid between a startup and a pretty established company. It really has a lot of those startup vibes. And so the types of researchers who tend to be successful at DoorDash tend to be scrappy, they tend to be fast, they tend to be flexible, self-starters, do it all type folks. They don't tend to be specialists, they tend to be more on the generalist side. And so when folks tend to get into the DoorDash product innovation process, which tends to be learn quickly, fail often, and eventually hit the target, that they're over and over repetitively coming up with really cool, even if they're tiny little ideas, even if it's a sentence or a quote or a stat, they're pulling constant insights in over time, rather than building up a big a big reveal over the course of, let's say, 2 weeks to 2 months before some big presentation at the end. It's that consistent drip of insights, a consistent building of empathy for the end users across both the team as well as cross-functional partners, in fast and scrappy ways that tends to be more successful. And you get a lot of feedback about the people who dig in and get involved in the full innovation process and don't see themselves as researchers. They see themselves as partners. They see themselves as part of the innovation process, coming up with the ideas themselves, etc.
I do think that's a really interesting cognitive something there where I don't know if this is true in other functions. I'd actually really like to know. But, I do think that a lot of times research people see themselves as researchers first, right? And there's almost like a disconnect from the rest of the team that builds, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Rather than I'm actually part of the building. I'm an important part of the building, right? I am building just in a very different way. And I noticed that when I look back on my past roles as well, right? Where I had this like cognitive dissonance between whatever it was we were evaluating or the customers or users we were, okay, I need to do some generative, who are these people? I don't know, I'll go study. Okay, this is what I learned about them. Here you go. Have fun. Yeah. Right? Or like, oh, you think this is really cool and you think this is going to work? Well, give it to me. I'll go, do the thing. I'll come back next week and I'll tell you if it works, and like, it's rather, so like, I definitely understand that. Do you think that that's like a researcher thing? Do other people do that too? Because it's just a very weird dynamic to be kind of part of like a product team, and also somehow in our minds sometimes we're like not.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably in the last 5-ish years, you see this more than I've ever seen it. There used to be more silos, I think, around skill sets. But nowadays, if you look at HCI degrees, or if you look at all this AI capabilities that kind of blur the lines between functions, that's the way things are going. People learn design and research. People are able to do coding through any sort of AI system. Or I'll give you an example. I'm not talking about this in my talk, but there is another AI talk I'm involved with. We trained an AI like entity, if you will, on something like 70 or 80 hours of qualitative research interviews with merchants that were talking about the menu creation process. Sure. It's within the merchant portal for DoorDash where merchants create their menu, right?
Yeah.
And then, so we've created this, I guess, this merchant menu expert that's virtual, and we can ask it questions about the menu. What if we were to do this? What if we were to do that? And is it perfect? I don't know. But is it insightful? Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And one of the things it will do after it tells you what its opinion is, it will say, you can ask it like, what would you build? Like, if you were going to solve this problem, how would you design it? How would you engineer it? What would it look like? And it will literally send the code for you, and you can just plug it in and you can.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it's not only a merchant, but it's a researcher, and it's a designer, and it's an engineer.
That's wild.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So like on my team right now, we're talking about the idea of prototyping. Okay, I don't know how to prototype, but I can use AI tools to create prototypes that I can use in research settings.
We may or may not have a related talk coming up at Research Week that can't say too much about it, but it's interesting and relevant to what you're saying. I've been like so interested in, I feel like when I don't know if this resonates with you, but I feel like every time we have a technological wave, there's like these different phases. I'm definitely not the first person who's described it maybe in this way as unique, whatever, but there's this foundational technological level, right? We created this new technology. So for example, like cloud computing or the mobile phone or whatever it is. And this stuff is just like this foundational layer. So today that would be like the AI labs. Yep. Then you have this like functional layer that gets put on top of it, right? Which is whatever functions we were doing before, we can just do it with this new software. It's much cheaper. I think a lot of the AI tools in research right now are at that stage, right? Which is, okay, before humans could interview users, now these things can interview users, or before humans could do the survey, whatever. The much more interesting thing to me is what happens next, which is like the design phase where, I think the best example of this is like Airbnb, which is they didn't invent any technology, right? All they did was arrange the pieces together in such a way that this insane idea of like sleeping in somebody's house couch randomly, it turns out is like incredibly economically valuable. And it's just because they designed it in such a way where certain things became obviated and other things became more important and whatever. And that is what you're talking about right here is an example of like applying this in a way to do something that never, it's like basically magic, right? It's never would have been possible before. And now like, what are all the implications of that? I don't know. Like that is unbelievable, right? I was talking with somebody else who's building a product that, the logical end result of it is it will help personalize every interface, right? So you have the DoorDash app. My DoorDash app would look different than your DoorDash app because I don't use I travel a lot, let's say. And so one of the things that I have to change all the time is like, where's my location versus you might be at home all the time. So you never use that. So like my location changer would be much bigger and more prominent. That is like, that's where we're heading. Like everything's up for grabs again.
I agree. And so like what we were talking about before, even without AI, designers, we've been trying to facilitate the ability for designers and product managers to do research, right? So that even they're trying to help out and try to understand the end user on their side, while at the same time on my side, on the research side, we will then get into Figma, come up with some ideas. There's a number of people that have those skill sets, or we will go into SQL and do some of the back-end data analysis stuff that we might have used to partner with the analytics team to do. But that's like,
just do it.
Right now you just do it. But that's some of these are not necessarily my skill sets. I'm more of a dinosaur. But the folks what I'm trying to say is that the folks that I'm hiring, like these are the skills that these people have. It's just kind of incredible. And I think the AI piece is really just unlocking everyone's ability to do those things that used to be more analog and used to be more like, hey, I can also do this and I can also do this. Now everyone can do it. It sort of democratizes abilities.
It feels like it's taking, the what's it called? The cliche of the T-shaped worker, T-shaped. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, it's got a really long top part across. So instead of being like competent in 10 areas, you're now competent in 100 areas. Yeah. I saw, what else did I see? One of the things that, because we have to write a lot for what we do, we've, even just to get feedback on our writing, you can take your best material and put it into and train a GPT on it, right? Like, the emails you're most proud of, the copy you're most proud of, the programming you're most proud of. And then whenever you write something, you can say like, okay, here's what I wrote. Can you make it more learnersy, more like me, more whatever? And it'll spit it. And it's shockingly good, right? Like, I'm not a UX writer. I could never do that, right? But now I have a tool that can make me competent enough that it makes me better at research and better at sales and better at everything else, because now I have this writing helper that's actually really good.
That's exactly right. We do a lot of that stuff too. We have about, I don't know. We have a typical way that we summarize our research reports, right? We write a paragraph. There's a structure to it. It talks about the question and the background, as well as a quick thing on the method and some top insight from the project. And we have a running list of hundreds and hundreds of these summaries that we have in our repository that we trained ChatGPT on our past way of writing these paragraphs. And then we can just throw a report at it and it'll send the paragraph back to us. So there's a lot of ways we've done, like you're describing, just to synthesize things as well on the AI side. But I think the real exciting piece is the ability to come up with new ideas that you weren't already thinking about, or to be the end user in some kind of way. I think the summary stuff is cool and I love it and it helps speed us up, but it doesn't provide additional value beyond saving you time. And so I get really pumped about these, just the idea of virtual personas. Or another thing we're trying now is synthetic data for quant. We're doing a project with Qualtrics. It's interesting. We haven't gotten the data back yet though.
I used to be a huge skeptic about like synthetic data just blank slate, like I think this is crap kind of thing. And I have been persuaded that at least in some cases, it can be valuable
I
and
think it
helpful.
can be valuable, but I think the populations that you're going after can't be super niche. But I don't know enough yet to have like a smart conversation about it yet.
How weird is it that we can't like, it feels inappropriate to say that, right? Like to say
Hmm.
like, I just don't like, we haven't evaluated this enough yet to know. Like, I remember I've said to people, I'm previously I'm pretty anti-synthetic data or whatever for this stuff. And then somebody who I know who's a credible person said, actually, there are some clear use cases where this can work, right? And one example that he gave is evaluating packaging. You can take different packaging concepts, for example, really simple stuff. Take different packaging concepts, specify a sample, and of target customers, and you can actually do a very good job at, like, if you do it with real people and then do it synthetically, it's almost exactly the same. And so I'm like, oh crap, okay, I guess I got to change my mind if this is true, right? Which is weird because that's definitely not the aura around how we talk about this stuff right now. But it's totally fine. We can just say, like, we'll wait and see. Could be bad, could be good. We don't know.
I'm open to anything, I guess,
Yeah.
when it comes to any of this kind of stuff. But I'm not open to blindly following, and I'm not open to just assuming that things are true.
Amen.
We're doing lots of research on research right now to find out which paths are going to be viable for us and which aren't. But it doesn't mean that other companies won't find other things valuable. But right now, what we're trying, like I mentioned before, your ability to do lots of things, your ability to be scrappy and speed is paramount, like all that kind of stuff. AI really helps you with all of those things.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, plus on that. Do you think, is there anything that you've seen where you're just like, where you strong, or at least have a gut feeling that it's like a total no to
I,
you?
so there is a place where there is a total no that I've heard from other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a use case that I think is actually kind of useful for this, and I'll give an example. So the idea of somebody else that's not a researcher conducting a qualitative interview. It could, like right now, we facilitate the ability of people who are not in research, aren't even in product development, aren't designers, have no training whatsoever in research, to sit down with end users and have conversations and conduct qualitative research, if you will. Is it great research all the time? Probably not. But there are tools out there that can run this research for you, right? So they have, they're, if you will, like qualitative agents, and we've piloted them, and they're actually pretty good at asking pretty good follow-up questions, at summarizing the insights that come out of like the transcripts and all this kind of stuff, even if the transcripts are coming from AI qualitative interviewers. I do believe that there is a kind of research or a kind of interviewer that you would be replacing with these AI agents, if you will, that it is better and more successful for you to use the AI tools than it would be to have them run the interviews themselves. Is this true for all instances? Absolutely not. Can you replace the skills of a researcher and the empathy building? Absolutely not. I had somebody on my team the other day say that they were talking with a dasher who was just over the moon about their ability to earn money in a flexible way around their schedule in life because things are difficult, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting emotional in the conversation with the researcher. So now they're both crying, the participant, the researcher on my team, they're like having this moment. And what the researcher on my team said to me is like, there's no way an AI agent would be able to have that emotional connection or create, that kind of emotional reaction with participant that's so genuine and so opening and freeing. And that's the thing that I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to be able to replace that level of emotional connection.
Yeah. I think thinking about it that way makes sense. It's for me at least, I've mentioned this a few times, the ability to not do the most mundane forms of research that are important to do, required often, would be very exciting to me if I was a
Absolutely.
full-time researcher. Like,
Yes.
it's just not a great use of most of our cognitive abilities to be doing, these standard usability tests all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's
And
more important things to figure out.
there are unmoderated tools out there as well that we've been using for years that we all are on board with. Like there's kind of no difference between
Yeah.
unmoderated tools and some of these. So I don't entirely understand, the pitchforks and the witch hunts and the, burn the tower down with Frankenstein stuff with AI. I don't understand that entirely because we kind of do a lot of these things already by outsourcing.
Dude, I totally get it. I totally get it. There's people, we have in the field for lack of a better term, like a Puritan wing of the field, right? Especially, I think, amongst people who have done very intensive academic training, right? And, you know, you want to feel like all those years are worth something, and it makes you better. And it probably does. Like, it almost certainly does make you better. The question is, in an industry setting, how good is good enough,
Yeah.
right? And the reality is, a lot of the time, it's like the difference between like a 99th percentile quality researcher at doing ethnography or interviews and a 92nd percentile, or in some cases a 60th percentile, is trivial sometimes.
I sort of agree, not 100% with like the quality of the people. I think the quality of the people need to be super top notch.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ability to detect differences when it comes to the analysis, statistics, stuff like that in academics, and the ability to support that those differences are real,
Yeah.
and the volume of work that goes into supporting that those differences are real is just a completely different ballgame.
Correct.
Like I have a PhD. When I was working on all of that kind of stuff, you had to really do test after test after test after test of all of these different theories, and the differences you're trying to detect are so tiny that you have to do all this work in order to determine whether you believe something to be true or not.
And other people are going to try and build off of your work, so it's actually critical that it's true, right? Because you just spent 2 years on this project, right? That means that the next people who want to build on top of that might spend 2 years working on whatever comes next. They really want to be able to take for granted that what you publish is true, right? It's not like you can do one thing 1 week, move on to the next, realize the last 2 weeks was wrong, start from again, and you just get so many more cracks of the bat.
I don't actually think that level of investment is required all of the time in industry settings because things move quickly. What I teach a class in UX research as well to undergrads.
Where do you teach?
Santa Clara University.
Nice.
One of the things I teach the students is that if you're detecting differences of 1%, let's say top two box, you ask an agreement question, top two box, like 52% for version 1 versus 51% in version 2, like it's kind of a waste of time to make that change, in my opinion. Like you're not going to see a bunch of behavioral changes. It's not going to make that big of a change on the metrics or the company or earnings or consumer attitudes at all. Like you're kind of wasting your time with that level of difference. Yeah, that's great for A/B testing when you have millions of participants, but like in a survey setting, that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And so if you aren't seeing bigger changes, 5%, 10% differences on these scales, like you're kind of wasting your time. And in order to detect differences that large, you have to do pretty big innovations. And so it's not like academics. And even if you send somebody down a wild goose chase 2 times out of 10, 3 times out of 10 with an insight you get quickly out of a research project, it's time well spent because you haven't wasted 2 years coming to that conclusion, and maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I don't know. There, to me, like, it's not that there's a looser standard. It's just that your ability to find things that might be true or closer to the truth is better than your ability to find an absolute truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, one thing that you touched on a little bit that I want to come back to, because you have done a bunch of hiring of recent too. I don't know about a bunch. Who's doing a bunch these
A
days?
couple,
But
actually. We did hire people this year, yes.
all right, amazing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think has been very interesting to watch is the rapid change of, I think, what we're looking for in new hires. I think it's fair to say.
Yep.
We have seen, especially in the mega cap tech companies, these mandates come down from the executives to say, like, we have expectations of trying to do things with AI and bringing that into the work that we're doing so that we can be more creative, be more efficient, be more everything, right?
Yeah.
Which has to affect hiring in some capacity. Would you say that's fair? Like, what you look for?
Yes, for sure, but it depends on the company you're talking about. If you're talking about like a company with a bloated research team, I agree with you. But if you're talking about DoorDash, I don't think that is true.
Okay, fair enough. Still, the AI stuff is probably relevant in, when you're interviewing people and hiring people. Are there things that you have seen that have been like really strong positive indicators or like made you really excited that relating to whether it's playing with AI tools, experimenting with stuff, different processes that you've seen where you're like, look, these types of activities are, I think, going to be indicative of people who are going to do really well on our team or be super productive, that kind of come to mind? Because I think a lot of folks are, especially people who are thinking about switching gigs or are currently looking, there's not a lot of clarity about like what's possible or what's exciting. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that you've seen that really got you all jazzed up about bringing somebody onto your team relating to that stuff.
Yeah, there's been multiple. We've hired 2 people this calendar year, which is quite a lot actually for us. In both of those cases, and in the cases of like some of the top candidates that we were interested in, that we went pretty far with the interview, AI has come up in pretty much every conversation. People have been pretty excited about where this can go. They want to know what is DoorDash doing on the AI front, not necessarily in the research side, although they are interested in that. It's oftentimes on the product side, right? So what are you thinking about for the future at DoorDash? And they just want to talk about it. And I think that's cool. And I don't look at it as, hey, they talked about AI, therefore like we should hire them.
Right.
I look at it as like, hey, they're curious.
Right.
But they show that curiosity in other ways as well. And AI might be one of those topics.
Yeah.
Hot interview tip for anyone who wants to get hired. By me, if you ever walk into an interview and it's clear that you've done your homework, like you've learned about DoorDash as a business, you've tried to understand all the different kinds of products, not just the consumer product, that's too easy. You've gone dashing, like anyone can download the Dasher app and they can go dashing and they can talk to me about the Dasher app. Do you know how many times that happens in interviews? Like maybe twice. And those people got hired.
Not surprised at all.
Those people got hired, right? But it's
there
just,
you go.
How can you show passion towards the end user, the products that are being created? Did you go down the street and talk to a merchant about their experience being a merchant on DoorDash? Like anybody can do these things. As a researcher, we're all trained to do it. And so talking about AI and using AI tools and thinking about AI is an example of what I look for that shows like intrinsic interest or passion towards the products or the brands that encompass either research at DoorDash or DoorDash product in general.
As somebody who's delivered food for money before.
Yeah, I have.
I can tell you that will be a very eye-opening experience and you will walk away with ideas about all sorts of things.
Exactly. My head of Dasher research walked into their interview and said, I did 11 dashes prior to this interview, and let me tell you what we want to change about the Dasher app.
Did they get hired? Answer, yes.
Yeah.
Did they know they were interviewing for like the Dasher experience role?
Yeah. They were most interested in the Dasher side.
Man, talk about like grabbing life by the horns and that kind of a situation. Like if you walk into this interview, because obviously I imagine if you're interviewing a candidate, you have things you want to talk to them about, things you want to evaluate, right? They walk in initially, like the whole conversation's flipped on its head, and now you're having a much more interesting one.
Yeah.
That is, you have the power to do that just by walking in the room and talking,
Honestly, anybody can do these things. If you think, I mean, this is like just tips in general, I guess, to people who try to get hired. If you think that at this point you're going to get hired based on your resume, it's probably not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Reason why is the market. I mean, I can tell you from having interviewed people, the market is flooded with highly overqualified people right now. And that's not what's going to set you apart. There's 100 people out there that have 5-10 years of experience at super name brand companies that can do all the research methods. It's the other stuff that's going to set you apart. And it's like we talked about at the beginning, to come full circle. It's your ability to create relationships with people. It's your ability to think differently. It's your passion towards the business. It's intrinsic motivation, self-starter, any of that kind of softer skills is what's going to set you apart. Storytelling, putting together a coherent presentation, all that kind of stuff that has nothing to do with what's on LinkedIn is really what's going to set you apart.
Boom. We gotta end it on that. That was awesome. Some elite interviewing advice from the one and only Zach Schendel. Folks, if you haven't already signed up to watch Zach's talk and much more, head on over to joinlearners.com/research week. That's joinlearners.com/research-week. Make sure you sign up for the remote tickets for the types of events and talks that you want to tune into. So we've got UXRConf, AI and UX research, great research with Alec. That one's focused on IC researchers. We have Up and Away with the one and only Judd Anton. We've got growth research with Zoe Glass. Lots of great talks, lots of great programs from wonderful folks like Zach. Zach, thank you for joining me. And guys, don't forget to grab your remote ticket if you haven't already. I promise you won't regret it. See you later.
Thank you.